The world was an intricate design of olfactory and auditory sensations, interwoven upon a loom of lunar luminescence. The frigid air, acute and pristine, possessed the essence of pine needles and humid soil. It permeated my lungs, a spectral experience within a form that was not intrinsically mine, yet resonated with a more profound sense of self than the one recumbent miles distant within a clinical apartment. My given name is Elias. However, within the heart of the sylvan whisper, I am known as Kael. My paws, a quartet of them, moved soundlessly across the expanse of pristine snow, each footfall a delicate pressure against the planet's very core. My ears, acutely triangular, swiveled, capturing the faint echo of a vole's cardiac rhythm beneath the alabaster blanket, the wind's sigh through the skeletal branches of a venerable oak, and the distant melancholic cry of a kindred owl. This constitutes our shared reality. During slumber, we transcend the realm of dreams. We connect. We transfer our human consciousness into the corporeal form of our bonded animal, a symbiotic partner to whom we are intrinsically linked from the moment of our birth. We experience their existence, their hunger, their trepidation, and their simple, yet profound, joy. It is a supplementary life, a nightly immersion into the untamed essence of the world. This evening, an acute hunger resonated within my abdomen, Kael's abdomen. The vole's frantic palpitations served as an alluring beacon. I lowered my physique, muscles coiling in anticipation, my russet fur a vibrant contrast against the monochromatic tableau. My perception narrowed to a singular focus, the subtle tremor within the snow. I discerned its fear, a pungent, electrifying tang, a bated breath, a sudden lunge, a gratifying crunch. The warmth of life surged within my mouth, expelling the cold. It was not an act of cruelty. It was rhythm, the eternal, unapologetic rhythm of survival that we, ensconced within our climate-controlled human edifices, had long since forgotten. As the subtle warmth settled within my stomach, a novel scent permeated the crisp atmosphere. It was foreign, acrid, chemical, and discordant. It was the scent of humanity, not the familiar, earthy aroma of the park rangers or the hikers who respectfully traversed the designated trails. This was the scent of industry, of impatience. Kyle's hackles elevated, an instinctive response that induced a tremor along my own dormant spine. I advanced stealthily, utilizing the gnarled roots of a fallen arboreal giant as concealment. Through a screen of snow-laden ferns, I beheld it. A clearing, unnaturally barren, where the moonlight gathered like spilled dairy. And at its epicenter, a pair of figures. One was a man, statuesque and broad, his countenance concealed by the profound shadow of a hood. The other was a stag, a magnificent creature, its antlers a crown of osseous material against the celestial canvas. I perceived its presence, a deep, resonant hum within the empathic field that interconnects us all. This was no feral animal. This was a bonded individual, someone's other half. The stag displayed no apprehension. It stood with a peculiar serenity, its large, somber eyes fixated upon the hooded man. There was no indication of panic, solely a deep, profound bewilderment. The man elevated a device, a metallic object that gleamed frigidly. It emitted a subtle hum, a dissonant chord within the forest's symphony that caused my teeth to ache. I observed, paralyzed, as the stag's limbs buckled. It descended to its knees, not with a crash, but with a gradual, graceful yielding. Its breath plumed within the frigid air, each exhalation diminishing in size. The man advanced. He bore no weapon, neither rifle nor blade. He simply placed his hand upon the stag's noble head between the majestic antlers. The hum emanating from the device intensified, and I experienced it. A psychic scream that tore through the very fabric of the connection. It was not an audible sound, but a sensation, a rending, a void, a sudden, absolute nothingness where a vibrant consciousness had previously existed. The stag's eyes glazed over. The illumination within them did not gradually fade. It was extinguished, like a snuffed candle. It collapsed onto its flank, a beautiful vacant vessel. Murder was an inadequate descriptor. This was something altogether different, something far more profane. We designate it severance. To terminate a bonded animal is to amputate a soul. I had heard narratives, campfire legends of the psychological devastation, the conscious death of the human counterpart. But to witness it firsthand, the man lingered over the remains for a fleeting moment, a silhouette of absolute negation. Subsequently, he turned. For a solitary, heart-stopping instant, the moonlight illuminated his visage. It was not the countenance of a monster. It was clean-shaven, with a sharply defined jawline and eyes that possessed a chilling lucidity. A face I recognized, a face I encountered almost daily. He was my supervisor, Marcus Thorne. The shock was a physical onslaught. It wrenched me from the connection. I gasped, bolting upright in my bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, the scent of pine and blood still clinging to my senses. My sheets were saturated with perspiration. The clinical, tranquil atmosphere of my apartment felt suffocating. The image was indelibly etched within my mind. The collapsing stag, the vacant eyes, and the countenance of the man responsible. Marcus Thorne, the celebrated visionary, the man whose eagle bond was a symbol of his soaring ambition. I stumbled towards the window, gazing out over the verdant, meticulously planned city of Ethelgard. Towers adorned with hanging gardens reached towards the heavens, their lights shimmering like a captive constellation. It was a city founded upon the principle of coexistence, a testament to the empathy our bonds had instilled within us. We were a society that revered life in all its manifestations, because we experienced it so intimately. Severance was the ultimate transgression, the most heinous crime conceivable. And I had just witnessed its commission, perpetrated by one of our city's architects. I envisioned the snow in my mind's eye, stained crimson not by blood, but by the recollection of a life violently unmade. A silent scream continued to reverberate within the recesses of my soul. I was the sole witness, a fox upon a hill, a man within a tower. And a question began to formulate, frigid and weighty within the pit of my stomach, a question that threatened the very foundation of my world. What malevolence festers within the heart of a man who can so readily silence a soul? And what is he constructing, if not a more refined world? The subsequent morning presented a study in dissonance. The city of Ethelgard awoke with its customary serene hum. Solar-powered sky trams glided silently between towers, their passengers gazing down upon the sprawling urban canopy with a sense of proprietary reverence. The atmosphere, filtered through 10,000 leaves of genetically engineered ivy, was pristine and cool. From my balcony on the 47th floor, I could perceive the central preserve, a vast, untamed, verdant expanse pulsating with life. From this vantage point, it appeared tranquil, whole. However, I possessed a more intimate understanding. I was cognizant of a wound within its heart, a patch of snow where a magnificent soul had been extinguished. My breakfast lacked flavor. The synthetic proteins and hydroponic fruits, typically a source of pristine, guilt-free energy, tasted like ash within my mouth. The guiding principle of our society was simple: empathy, cultivated from shared experiences. Since the Great Awakening 2 centuries prior, when the bond phenomenon became universal, humanity had reshaped its very essence. How could one consume a cow whose terror one might experience during slumber? How could one clear-cut a forest that served as the living, breathing habitat of one's other self? Our entire civilization, our laws, our diet, our architecture, was predicated upon this nightly pilgrimage into the consciousness of another. We were not merely stewards of the earth. We were integral to it, our nervous systems intertwined with its ley lines. To be bonded is to be complete. To be severed is to be rendered a ghost. The surviving human is left with a perpetual phantom limb of the soul, a constant, aching void where the animal senses once resided. They are cared for within quiet institutions, their eyes perpetually distant, lost within a dreamless sleep from which they never truly awaken. Severance was a transgression so profound, so fundamentally unnatural, that it was spoken of only in hushed tones. And Marcus Thorne, my mentor and the preeminent architect of Nexus Corp, was a severer. The journey to the Nexus Tower felt akin to a descent into hypocrisy. I, Elias, bonded to Kyle the Fox, was a bioarchitect. My vocation was to design the very structures that defined Ethelgard's symbiotic relationship with nature. We integrated buildings into living ecosystems, establishing corridors for wildlife between skyscrapers, designing facades that housed entire colonies of birds and insects. We designated it harmonious integration. We were celebrated as visionaries, the weavers of a new Eden. Today, it all felt like a fabrication, a beautiful, gilded cage. The lobby of Nexus Tower was a cathedral to this deception. A 50-foot waterfall cascaded down a wall of living moss. Sunlight, angled by colossal mirrors, nurtured a grove of indoor redwood saplings. And soaring high above, within the vaulted glass ceiling, was a flash of gold and white. Vile, Marcus's golden eagle. His bond served as a testament to his status, a predator at the apex of its domain. Individuals on the ground floor paused and stared, their faces filled with awe. An eagle bond was an indication of vision, of ambition, of a soul capable of soaring above the mundane. A fox bond, such as mine, was perceived as adaptable, cunning, a survivor, something of the earth rather than the sky, slightly too wild, slightly too common for the pristine towers of power. Elias, there you are. Marcus's voice, like every other facet of his persona, was smooth, confident, and resonant with power. He strode towards me, clapping a hand upon my shoulder. He was impeccably attired, his smile flawlessly white. There was no vestige of the hooded figure in the snow, no hint of the psychic violence I had witnessed. His eyes, a piercing shade of blue, were clear and bright. How could they be? How could they not be haunted? "Big day," he said, his hand lingering upon my shoulder, a gesture that was both familiar and suddenly menacing. The final presentation for the Umbrawood project. The board is anticipating significant results. The Umbrawood project. My heart plummeted. It was our most ambitious undertaking to date. A novel residential arcology to be constructed on the periphery of the Northern Preserve. The very same preserve where Kyle roamed. The very same preserve where the stag had perished. After reviewing your latest schematics, he proceeded, guiding me toward the elevators. The work is commendable, quite efficient, in fact. However, I believe we possess the capacity to be bolder. We entered the glass elevator, watching as the city receded beneath us. Bolder? I questioned, my voice betraying my apprehension. The environmental impact assessments reveal a small tract of old-growth forest within the designated quadrant, Marcus stated, his gaze unwavering as he observed the world diminishing below. Your design meticulously navigates around this area, a demonstration of elegance, yet also timidity. That forest constitutes a vital corridor for migratory species, I countered, the words sounding feeble even to my own ears. Moreover, it is classified as a Class 4 sensitivity zone. The empathy wardens would never sanction such a clearing. Marcus finally turned his attention to me, and for a fleeting moment I glimpsed it once more. The chilling clarity emanating from the clearing, the stark absence of something. Elias, empathy serves as a tool, not a restraint. Our purpose lies in constructing the future, not in being held captive by the nostalgia of the past. A mere handful of ancient trees, the minor inconvenience experienced by a few squirrels and badgers. It represents a trifling cost when weighed against progress that will benefit millions. The discomfort. That was his chosen descriptor. The sheer terror of a collapsing habitat. The unbridled panic of displacement. The battle for survival that resonated within my very being each and every night. He dismissed it as a mere inconvenience. The board concurs, he stated, his voice lowering. We must challenge the existing boundaries. I require a revised plan from you by morning, one that unequivocally demonstrates the arcology's foundation situated directly within that quadrant. A decisive, assertive footprint. The elevator doors parted, revealing our floor. A sprawling open-plan office where trees grew seamlessly through the desks. He offered me a smile, a predator's smile. I am confident you possess the capacity, Elias. You possess that survivor's instinct, the cunning of the fox. Employ it. He departed, leaving me standing there as the world seemed to tilt precariously on its axis. He sought my complicity in signing the death warrant for a portion of Kael's territory, my home. He intended for me to exploit the very essence of my bond, the resourcefulness and adaptability of the fox, to betray it. This was a test, a loyalty test. However, to whom did my allegiance truly belong? The man who was shaping my career, or the silent quadrupedal creature who was shaping my soul? I remained motionless, observing the people at work, the entirety of our perfect world's intricate system humming around me. I came to the realization that the most egregious falsehood was not the architecture or the pristine air. The deception lay in the conviction that we had conquered our own nature. We had merely concealed it more effectively. The concrete jungle had vanished, replaced by a genuine one, yet the predators remained, albeit adorned in finer attire, and I was compelled to work for one of them. What alternative did I possess? The night provided a sanctuary, a haven. As sleep enveloped my anxious human form, the world dissolved and reconstituted itself into something primal and authentic. I was Kyle once more. However, the customary surge of liberation was absent, supplanted by a gnawing unease that was both mine and his. The forest, Kyle's home, felt altered, tainted. The memory of the severance lingered like a phantom scent, a psychic blemish upon the land. Kyle was restless, pacing along the periphery of his territory with a nervous energy, his nose twitching, his ears perpetually attuned to the discordant hum of the man-made device. My own inner turmoil permeated his consciousness. The Umbrawood project loomed as a menacing shadow, a blueprint for destruction superimposed upon this vibrant, breathing landscape. Each tree that Marcus had dismissed as old and timid served as a landmark to Kyle. An ancient, gnarled oak marked the spot where he had sought refuge from his first winter storm. A dense thicket of thorny bushes was where the vixen had nurtured her first litter. This was not merely a patch of forest. It was a repository of memories, a history inscribed in scent and survival. And my assigned task was to obliterate it. Throughout my life, I had existed in a state of perpetual limbo between two disparate worlds. I vividly recall the initial connection. I was 6 years old, feverish and lost within the confines of a child's nightmare. Then, abruptly, the fever subsided, and I found myself elsewhere. I was small, close to the ground, enveloped by the warm, musky aroma of my mother and siblings in a dark, earthy den. My fear dissipated, replaced by a profound and simple sense of belonging. I was a kit, barely weaned. I spent the entirety of that night experiencing the world as a symphony of olfactory sensations, my tiny nose discerning the subtle nuances between friend, foe, and sustenance. Upon awakening, I attempted to convey the experience to my parents, the sensation of fur and the taste of mother's milk. They smiled, understanding. My father shared a bond with a harbor seal, and he frequently awoke with the taste of salt on his lips. My mother, bonded to a city sparrow, possessed an intimate knowledge of Ethelgard's hidden roots and rooftops, surpassing that of any mapmaker. They expressed pride in my fox bond. "A fox is astute, Elias," my father had remarked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "He possesses a knowledge of both the city and the wilderness. He navigates both worlds much like a bioarchitect should, and that aspiration became my guiding principle. To serve as the bridge, to conceive of a world in which the boundary between the city and the wild blurred into a seamless whole, a world where a fox could hunt in the shadow of a skyscraper without trepidation. I channeled all of my ambition into this pursuit, ascending rapidly through the ranks at Nexus Corp, ultimately capturing the attention of Marcus Thorne himself. He perceived my dual nature as an advantage. "You comprehend the constraints of the wild, Elias," he had once stated, "which uniquely qualifies you to tame it. Tame it." At the time, I had been thrilled by the compliment. Now, the word felt like a brand. That evening, Kyle led me away from the threatened old-growth quadrant, venturing deeper into the heart of the preserve. He moved with determination, and I allowed his instincts to guide me. We arrived at a small, concealed den, nestled within the roots of a fallen pine tree. The entrance was obscured by a curtain of hanging moss. It served as his most secluded sanctuary, a refuge he sought when storms raged or danger loomed. The interior was dark, permeated by the scent of dry earth and fox. And something else. Another fox. A sleek vixen was curled up in the back of the den. She raised her head as we entered, her eyes glowing like amber in the dim light. There was no aggression, only a quiet acknowledgement. This was his mate. My heart, my human heart, ached with a strange, vicarious tenderness. I had never attained this level of intimacy in my own life. My relationships were invariably hesitant, guarded. I was too preoccupied with building my career, too fearful of allowing anyone to witness the messy, untamed aspects of my being, the aspects that belonged to Kael. Yet here, in the darkness, was a simple, profound connection that I could only observe. However, as I settled into the tranquility of the den, the conflict resurfaced more acutely than ever. This was what was at stake, not merely trees and territory, but this, life, a future, a family that was both mine and not mine. If I designed the arcology as Marcus demanded, the construction, the noise, the human proximity would drive them from this territory. It would shatter this fragile peace. Kael would lose his home, his mate. Fear gripped me like a cold knot in my chest. Not just fear for Kael, but fear for myself. What transpires when the world you construct during the day obliterates the world you inhabit at night? You become a walking civil war. The hypocrisy would consume me from the inside out. But what was the alternative? To defy Marcus Thorne, the man who held my future in his hands, the man who could sever a soul without hesitation. To cross him felt like a suicidal act. I would forfeit my job, my reputation. I would become an outcast in the world I had strived so diligently to join. I was ensnared. My ambition, the very force that had propelled me to become a bridge between worlds, now served as the hammer poised to shatter it all. My father's words reverberated in my mind. A fox walks in two worlds. He had intended it as a blessing, but it felt like a curse. To belong everywhere was to belong nowhere. I was a traitor in my sterile apartment, and I was a traitor in this earthen den. The vixen shifted, pressing her warmth against Kael's side. A profound, instinctual peace emanated from her. A current of pure, uncomplicated being, a peace that my human self could not comprehend. In my waking life, I had Lena, my closest friend, a landscape artist bonded to a gentle doe. She embodied that peace. She often cautioned me that my ambition was a fire that would one day consume my own house. I had always dismissed it as idealism, but now, curled in the darkness, I felt the heat. My greatest apprehension was not failing Marcus or being terminated from my position. It was the dread of the connection weakening, of Kael perceiving me as a threat through his own eyes, the dread of closing my eyes one night and feeling nothing. The ultimate loneliness, the severance that I would inflict upon myself through 1,000 small betrayals. I lay there, a man dreaming he was a fox, next to a fox dreaming only of being a fox. My two lives were on a collision course, and I was standing at the point of impact. The choice was simple and impossible: preserve my soul or preserve my life. As dawn approached, the connection began to wane. The sense of the den diminished, replaced by the sterile aroma of my apartment. The warmth of the vixen dissolved into the cold linen of my sheets. However, one feeling persisted, an echo from Kael's simple, powerful mind, a fierce, primal protectiveness. It was not a thought, but an instinct, and it sparked an idea within me, a dangerous, cunning, fox-like idea. What if I could circumvent the need to choose between defiance and compliance? What if I could discover a third path? The atmosphere within the empathy warden's precinct was laden with a peculiar blend of bureaucratic stillness and psychic residue. The walls were painted in a soothing shade of green, and calming, low-frequency sounds permeated the space, designed to soothe the frayed nerves of those who grappled with the repercussions of empathic trauma. It was a place rarely seen by outsiders, a place that confronted the shadowy underbelly of our interconnected world. I felt conspicuously out of place in my pristine Nexus Corp attire. My plea for a meeting had encountered layers of automated bureaucracy. Yet by mentioning Marcus Thorne and the Umbrawood project, I had ultimately managed to secure an audience with a senior warden. My heart pounded within my chest. This constituted the first move in a game I did not fully comprehend, a gambit that could either deliver me or expose me utterly. Warden Kaya was a woman who appeared to have been sculpted from granite. Her face presented a mask of severe neutrality, but her eyes, dark and perceptive, overlooked nothing. Her bond, as I knew from public records, was with a desert tortoise, a creature possessing immense patience, resilience, and latent strength. She did not offer me a seat. "Mr. Elias," she commenced, her voice possessing a low and gravelly timbre. "Your request was unconventional. You cited a security concern pertaining to the Umbrawood project. Nexus Corp possesses its own extensive security division. Why approach us?" I inhaled deeply, the falsehood I had rehearsed throughout the morning feeling clumsy upon my tongue. "Warden, as part of our concluding due diligence, I was conducting a deep sensory survey of the proposed construction site, a complete fabrication. I was employing advanced bioscanners to map the empathic resonance of the area." Kaya's countenance remained unchanged. "A task for a nexus biologist, not a lead architect." "I espouse a hands-on methodology," I countered, attempting to channel Marcus's unwavering confidence. During the survey, I detected a traumatic empathic echo, a residue of extreme distress, culminating in a sudden null point, consistent with an unsanctioned severance. There, it was spoken. I had reported the crime without confessing I had witnessed it. I was merely a conscientious architect reporting an anomaly. Kaya remained silent for a protracted moment. She traversed to a sizable holographic map of the city and its adjacent preserves. With a flourish, she highlighted the Umbrawood sector. A diminutive crimson marker commenced blinking in the precise area where the stag had perished. They were already aware. My fabricated discovery was old news to them. My bluff had been exposed before I had even completed my sentence. "We have been cognizant of the anomaly for 48 hours, she stated, her back directed toward me. The human counterpart, a city councilman named Julian Croft, experienced a catastrophic psychic collapse 2 nights prior. He is presently in the care of the Serenity Institute." My blood turned frigid. The stag possessed a name, a life, a family, and he was gone. "So you are investigating?" I inquired, my voice barely audible. "Investigating a psychic echo within a forest, absent physical evidence, witnesses, or motive is complex," she said, pivoting to confront me. Her eyes narrowed. "Unless naturally a witness were to emerge." The air crackled with unspoken significance. She was probing, testing my resolve. Did she suspect me? Or was she extending a lifeline? "A witness would find themselves in a precarious situation," I responded cautiously. "If the perpetrator were powerful." "Power is not an aegis against the law, Mr. Elias," she declared, yet her intonation lacked conviction. It was the official line, not the truth. "Is it not?" I dared to query. A flicker of something, perhaps frustration, crossed her face. "We inhabit a world predicated on empathy. However, certain individuals perceive that empathy as a confinement. They yearn for a world devoid of it, a world wherein they can act without experiencing the ramifications, absent the silent judgment of a bonded soul observing their every action. Such an individual would be capable of any deed to attain that." She was alluding to Marcus. She knew, or at least she suspected, but she was impotent. Marcus Thorne was not merely a celebrated architect. He was a political force, his projects shaping the city's future, his influence permeating the highest echelons of government. An accusation devoid of irrefutable proof would constitute professional suicide for her as well. "I appreciate you bringing this anomaly to our attention, Mr. Elias," she said, her voice reverting to a formal, dismissive tone. "Your report is duly noted. We shall manage it henceforth." I was being dismissed. My gambit had failed. I had revealed my hand, and she had declined to participate. I felt a surge of desperation. "The Umbrawood project," I stated, my voice rising slightly. Marcus Thorne is advocating for the clearance of that entire quadrant, the old-growth forest. He desires new plans upon his desk by morning. If you are investigating, you must halt the construction. Impose a moratorium on the area. It is a crime scene. Kaya regarded me, and for the first time, I discerned a sliver of pity within her eyes. Mr. Elias, do you possess any comprehension of the extent of political and economic capital invested in that project? A city councilman's tragic collapse constitutes a tragedy. Derailing the largest development project in a decade constitutes a crisis. The city will not elect the crisis. She proceeded to her desk and tapped a console. Your concern for the site's integrity is admirable. I shall, however, issue a temporary injunction on any groundbreaking activities within that specific quadrant, pending further environmental review. It is the utmost I can accomplish. It will postpone matters by 1 week, perhaps 2. It was not a victory, but it was not a complete defeat. It was a reprieve, a modicum of time. Thank you, Warden, I said, my voice hoarse. As I turned to depart, her voice arrested me. Mr. Elias, I glanced back. Foxes are survivors, she said, her gaze intense. They are sufficiently clever to evade traps, but they are also sufficiently clever to recognize which battles they cannot prevail in alone. Exercise caution, lest you become ensnared in a snare of your own creation. I exited the precinct with her words reverberating within my mind. The city outside appeared brighter, harsher. I had purchased Kael and his mate a modicum of time, but I had also positioned myself directly within Marcus Thorne's trajectory. He would discern that it was I who had approached the wardens, who had instigated the delay. The hands-on approach excuse was flimsy at best. The trial was no longer merely concerning the choice between my career and my soul. I had stumbled into a significantly larger conflict, a silent war between those who cherished the bond and those who perceived it as a chain. And I was now a soldier, regardless of my desire. My initial trial was not defying Marcus. It was realizing that defiance was insufficient. As I rode the sky tram back to the Nexus Tower, a novel, chilling question settled over me. Why would Marcus, a man possessing a powerful eagle bond, desire a world devoid of empathy? What kind of freedom was he pursuing, high aloft in his solitary sky? The 14 days Kaya had secured for me represented a fragile truce in a war of nerves. At work, Marcus resembled a storm cloud upon the horizon. He did not confront me directly regarding the injunction. He did not need to. His disapproval was a palpable force, a frigid pressure in every meeting, a keen edge to every request. He assigned me to the most tedious, soul-crushing tasks, reviewing municipal plumbing codes, optimizing waste recycling airflow, burying me in bureaucratic minutiae while the substantive, creative work on the Umbrawood project was delegated to other teams. He was isolating me, neutering my influence, making it unambiguous that my timidity bore consequences. Each night, I fled to Kael. The forest existed on high alert. The injunction had halted the immediate threat, but the scent of surveyors and their equipment lingered upon the territory's edges. Kael and the Vixen were skittish. Their den, formerly a sanctuary, now felt like a temporary refuge. The peace I sought within the connection was fractured, supplanted by a constant low-grade anxiety. My human stress was poisoning my animal refuge. My friend Lena perceived the alteration within me. We convened at our customary location, a diminutive, tranquil cafe overlooking the city's aquatic reclamation cascades. Her bond was a doe, a creature of gentle vigilance, and Lena shared that quality. She could decipher the subtle shifts in my posture, the tension within my jaw, the manner in which my eyes perpetually scanned the crowds. "You appear as though you have not truly slept in weeks, Elias," she said, her voice gentle. Her own eyes were clear, serene. Her nights were expended grazing in moonlit meadows, a simple existence that grounded her. I envied her for it. "Marcus is sidelining me," I admitted, stirring my chicory coffee. "The Umbrawood project. He desires to clear the northern preserve." Lena's face clouded. Her doe, Lyra, frequently sought refuge in those woods during the harshest segments of winter. "Clear it. They cannot. The wardens would never permit it. The empathic fallout would be catastrophic." "They would if they did not possess a choice," I muttered, more to myself than to her. "Or if the fallout could somehow be muffled." The word lingered in the air between us. Muffled. The low, dissonant hum emanating from the clearing. The stag's placid confusion preceding its demise. The absence of terror. It was all awry. An animal confronting death, particularly at the hands of a human, should inundate the empathic field with panic. It constitutes a psychic alarm bell for the entire ecosystem. However, the stag had been quiet. It was as if its capacity to feel, to broadcast its fear, had been silenced prior to its life being extinguished. A horrifying hypothesis commenced forming within my mind, a synthesis of my architectural knowledge and my intimate understanding of the connection. The bond constitutes a form of quantum entanglement, a psychic resonance between two distinct biological entities. What if a device could be constructed to disrupt that resonance, not to sever it, but to dampen it, to create a field of psychic static that would isolate an animal from its human counterpart and the world at large? Within such a field, one could clear a forest, and the bonded humans would perceive nothing beyond a vague sense of unease, a distant sadness they could not place. One could commit severance, and the victim's human half would experience solely a slow, confusing fade to black, not a violent psychic tear. It would constitute the perfect weapon for a man who perceives empathy as a confinement, a tool to dismantle the very foundation of our world, quietly, without anyone noticing until it was too late. "Elias, what troubles you?" Lena inquired, her hand gently covering mine. "You are frightening me." "I must ascertain the truth," I murmured, my thoughts racing. "Nexus Corp, the Research and Development Division. It is an enigma. Marcus invests a considerable fortune into it, yet no one comprehends their actual endeavors within those walls. The plan that materialized was audacious, conceived out of desperation. As a principal architect, I possessed high-level authorization, albeit not for research and development, but rather for the building's infrastructure schematics. I could gain access to the master plans for the Nexus Tower, the electrical conduits, the network cabling, the climate regulation systems. Should a clandestine project be consuming vast quantities of energy or necessitate specialized shielded infrastructure, it would undoubtedly leave an imprint on the blueprints, a spectral presence within the machine. That evening, following the connection with Kael, which left me more perturbed than refreshed, I remained awake. I approached my terminal, my fingers dancing across the holographic interface, my heart pounding with each security layer I bypassed. I was delving into territory that could result in my termination and imprisonment. I retrieved the schematics for the sub-levels of the Research and Development Department, designated Sector Gamma. Superficially, it appeared to be a collection of standard laboratories and server farms. However, upon cross-referencing the energy consumption grids, I discovered it. A solitary laboratory, designated G7, was drawing more power than the entire remainder of the floor combined. The power source was not the building's primary solar grid. It was routed through a dedicated, shielded conduit that descended to a private geothermal source far beneath the tower. The chamber itself was shielded with layers of dense, exotic alloys, akin to those employed in deep space probes to safeguard delicate instruments from cosmic radiation. This was no ordinary laboratory. It was a containment cell. My blood congealed. I infiltrated the laboratory's internal climate control logs, seeking any information, any data whatsoever. The majority was encrypted, but I unearthed one unsecured file, a thermal imaging archive from a recent systems evaluation. The file opened, revealing a heat map of Laboratory G7. At its center stood a sizable cylindrical apparatus, radiating residual energy. Adjacent to it, within a transparent enclosure, resided a life form, a small mammal, a rabbit. I observed the archived footage as the device was activated. A wave of energy, imperceptible to the unaided eye but visible on the thermal scan, washed over the enclosure. The rabbit, which had been nervously grooming itself, abruptly froze. Its thermal signature, the luminescence of its existence, did not vanish. It merely dimmed. Its physical form remained alive, retaining warmth, but the radiant energy that all sentient, conscious beings emit appeared to contract, to congeal, to withdraw inward. It continued to breathe, its heart continued to beat, but it had been transformed into a biological automaton, a vacant vessel. This was the revelation, a severance device. Not merely a weapon to eliminate a solitary bonded animal, but a technology capable of pacifying and isolating on a grand scale. Marcus was not simply a murderer. He was constructing a weapon of spiritual mass annihilation. The Umbrawood project was not solely about a novel arcology. It served as the testing arena. He intended to employ the dampener, undoubtedly a field that suppressed the connection, to clear the forest with impunity, thereby demonstrating the technology's effectiveness to his clandestine investors. And the stag, Julian Croft's stag, that was not an act of random cruelty. It was a field trial, a calibration exercise. I leaned back, a profound sense of nausea engulfing me. We were not residing within a gilded cage. We were inhabiting a laboratory, and Marcus Thorne was the chief scientist, prepared to commence his grand experiment. His ambition extended beyond merely violating the rules of our world. He sought to rewrite the very laws of reality. And I, the fox, had inadvertently wandered into the core of his trap. I now possessed his secret, a revelation that transformed me from a mere annoyance to a target for elimination. My temporary injunction was no longer a trivial matter. It represented a direct challenge. The countdown had begun, and I could hear it, although I was uncertain whether it tolled for his project or for my own demise. The discovery of the severance device irrevocably altered the landscape. The world lost its verisimilitude. The tranquil sky trams, the verdant vertical gardens, the cheerful countenances of my fellow citizens, all appeared as an elaborate stage production, and I alone had glimpsed the gaping fissure in the backdrop. My fear transcended vague apprehension, solidifying into a frigid, sharp-edged certainty. Marcus was not simply a criminal. He was a heretic, plotting to dismantle the deity of our era. Empathy itself. I felt compelled to reveal this to someone. I transferred the schematics and the thermal imaging file onto a secure data chip, my hands trembling. Lena was the sole individual I could confide in. I encountered her in the deepest, most secluded recess of the central preserve, a sanctuary where the city's hum faded into a distant echo. I unveiled everything to her. As she viewed the footage of the rabbit's light diminishing, her countenance, typically so open and gentle, metamorphosed into a mask of horrified incredulity. The doe within her recoiled, emitting a wave of unadulterated terror that resonated through our shared friendship. This signifies the end of everything, she whispered, her eyes wide with trepidation. Elias, you cannot confront this alone. We must present this to the High Council, to the wardens, to everyone. To Warden Kaya? I retorted, bitterness permeating my voice. I attempted to do so. She granted me 2 weeks. Marcus wields power exceeding the law, Lena. He embodies the law within this city. Should we go public, he will suppress this. He will bury us. He will portray me as a disgruntled employee, a corporate spy, and discredit the data. Then what recourse do we have? She exclaimed, her voice trembling. We cannot remain idle. Consider Lyra. Consider Kael. Consider everyone. I am uncertain, I confessed, the weight of the situation crushing me. I merely know that a direct confrontation constitutes suicide. My pronouncements proved more prophetic than I realized. The subsequent morning I received a summons, not to Marcus's office but to the boardroom on the executive floor. The room was shrouded in darkness with the city lights twinkling far below. Marcus awaited me, standing before the expansive window, a silhouette against the cityscape. He was unaccompanied. Elias, he commenced, turning slowly, his voice tranquil, almost gentle. You have been avoiding my presence. I have been occupied with the assignments you entrusted to me, I responded, my defenses already engaged. Ah, yes, the plumbing codes. My apologies for that. I experienced disappointment, he continued, advancing towards me. You demonstrated such potential, that brilliant, untamed intellect, the perfect amalgamation of human ingenuity and animal instinct. And then, you succumbed to fear. You appealed to the wardens, attempting to conceal yourself behind bureaucracy. That is not the way of the fox, Elias, nor the eagle. My blood turned to ice. He possessed knowledge, of course. The injunction will be rescinded by morning, he continued, circling me like a predator. My associates on the council have been persuaded. The Umbrawood project will proceed as planned, precisely as I planned. You cannot, I asserted, my voice trembling yet resolute. The forest. The forest is a sentimental relic, he snapped, his composure momentarily dissolving, revealing a countenance contorted with furious contempt. It symbolizes our stagnation. For 200 years we have permitted this psychic tether to dictate our destiny. We offer whispered apologies to the trees we prune. We lament the pests we exterminate. We have chained our potential to the sentiments of squirrels and rabbits. Do you possess any comprehension of what we could achieve if we were liberated? Liberated, I countered. What you perceive as a tether, the rest of us recognize as humanity, our connection, our empathy. It is what prevents us from transforming into monsters. Marcus emitted a short, bitter laugh. You believe this constitutes humanity? This timid pastoral fantasy? Living our secondary existences as beasts in the dirt? Our ancestors constructed empires, traversed oceans, reached for the stars. And what do we accomplish? We design more aesthetically pleasing cages.